Today I'm going to talk to you about a period that was at the heart of my research for a long time, that I left for a while, and which I became interested again in the recent year, which is the transition from Bronze Age to Iron Age. I'm now researching this topic in south of Uzbekistan, in the Pashkurt Valley. So you have an idea of how it looks on this picture. This transition period remains one of the main issues of protohistoric Central Asia, especially because of the apparent radical nature of the changes and the absence of clear causes. So, as you know, around the middle of the second millennium BCE, the Oxus civilization disappeared and was replaced by the early Iron Age culture, a period often wrongly considered as a strong material, socioeconomic, and cultural decline. It should rather be defined as a period of great renewal, since some of the key features of Central Asia up to the Hellenistic period are introduced during this period. Just to sum up briefly, this transition may be defined by a total transformation of the material culture, with the disappearance of wheel-made pottery, of iconography, prestige goods, and all other artifacts but utilitarian tools, by a radical transformation of the settlement pattern, with large cities fragmenting to small villages but spreading to new areas, by the intensification of contacts with the steppe cultures, while long-distance trades with the culture of the Iranian plateau and the Indo-Pakistani borderlands went on. And all these transformations are linked to a shift in the religious beliefs, especially with the disappearance of the religious iconography and temples, and with the appearance of new mortuary practices, because burials are replaced by open-air excarnation. This is why I'd rather speak of cine-sepulchral cultural complex for this period and the following period of the Middle and Late Iron Age. Recent research on this transition period have suggested multifactorial causes for this transition, but it is still understudied. Several hypotheses, which are not mutually exclusive, could be considered: the arrival of a new population, the internal evolution of the Oxus civilization, or a climate change being the most popular explanation. But despite the apparent magnitude of these transformations, if we look at the local scale, that of the site, we realize that the transition was a short-term and gradual transition, often with coexistence of several cultural groups, so including the Oxus civilization, the Yazwan culture, and the Anjonovo-related cultures. So instead of looking at this period from the point of view of the collapse of the Oxus civilization, and to consider the early Iron Age culture only as a post-collapse process, I believe we should adopt a different perspective centered on the formation and the development of new culture in challenging circumstances. I think multiple processes resulted in the fragmentation of the settlements, which reflects the formation of small polities centered on their own territories instead of the one strong centralized power of the Oxus civilization. At the same time, the extension of the territory occupied demonstrates their total ability to exploit a larger variety of ecotones. One of these newly occupied areas is the Pashkurt Valley in southern Uzbekistan. As you can see on this map made by Kai, this area was occupied during the Middle Bronze Age or Late Bronze Age 1, depending on which label you choose to use, with about 20 sites recorded by Kai Canute, and it was abandoned during the 18th century BCE. It was only during the 13th century BCE that it was reoccupied, when several sites I'm going to talk to you about were established. So it's making this group of sites the only sites known in the whole Central Asia in a mountainous region. So it is a perfect opportunity to study early Iron Age culture on a local and micro-regional scale, and to study its evolutionary adaptation to new conditions. This area was identified in 2014 by Ladislav Stancho, Shapulat Shaidulayev, and their team during surveys. One site, you can see on the top, Borut Kurgan, was attributed to the early Iron Age thanks to a collection of pottery on the surface. And between 2015 and 2017, I had the opportunity to work on this site in collaboration with the Czech Uzbek mission. At the same time, they went on surveying, and they identified some more sites from the same period, including Karit Tepa and Gazak Cutan. Then they focused on other sites, and I set up a research program in this area by creating a joint French-Uzbek mission in collaboration with the Termez University and directed by Shapulat Shaidulayev and Alisher Salidulayev on the Uzbek site, with the help of Ulugбек Shapulatov for the geoarchaeological work. Since 2017, we have undertaken excavation or exploration of the entire oasis using a variety of methods. So the Iron Age sites recorded by our colleagues have been all systematically surveyed, both on the surface and using geomagnetic prospection. And as a result, we reduced the number of sites with preserved early Iron Age remains to 4, which we have since that time more or less extensively studied, with a 5th site discovered in 2022. 3 of the sites are built on the same model, which was unknown until then. There are some small fortified villages controlling an agricultural territory. And you will see in a minute, they are all set on promontories, offering an excellent view over the valleys, and on the communication roads and on surrounding pasture. The 4th site is a small satellite site, probably a farm. And the 5th site, Kuduk Bulak in purple here, doesn't seem to have any fortification, but it displays a fairly important architecture. And so now I'm going to give you an overview of our work on all these sites. The first site to be excavated and the best known is Borut Kurgan. As you can see on this picture, it is located at the edge of a ridge overlooking a small valley. We opened 17 trenches with in red the 2 last trenches we opened in May this year during our last field season. These trenches covered all the preserved area of the site because all the central and eastern part of the site have been strongly eroded by a canal dug in the mid-20th century. So we have now the general outlines of the site, which is surrounded by a stone wall that form an oval enclosure measuring about 60 by 45 meters. We also opened several trenches outside the surrounding wall, in some places where geomagnetic surveys indicated some anomalies, but in fact there is no sign of occupation except some dump pits. So occupation was limited to the intramuros occupation. The surrounding wall is built directly on the virgin soil. It is built with rough boulders 30 to 50 centimeters in size. In each best preserved section, it It has a height of 1 meter 30, 1 meter 50, and it is between 1 meter 20 and 1 meter 70 thick. It was built, as you can see on this example of modern wall, it was built in parsa and in mud bricks in its upper part. It's difficult to evaluate the total height of the wall, but in several cases, we have some rows of fallen mud bricks. In some cases, we have about 10 rows, and so we can evaluate the part of mud brick to 2 meters or 2.5 meters. So it was quite a high wall. The gate to enter the site is located in a southwestern part of the site. It was probably a kind of chicane gate made by 2 perpendicular lines of stone and with a compact mud. Only 1 bed of stones was preserved, but the area revealed strong magnetic anomalies. This gate is further made by an interruption of the surrounding wall. You see the wall has a rounded end at the interruption, making an entrance about 2 meter 20 centimeters wide. So you can see here in red. And later, this gate was reduced by adding a small portion of the wall in brown on the picture. In the middle, there is a threshold made with stone and clay at the level of the floor. Inside the settlement, some structures are abutting this stone-based wall. So they include long mud brick wall in white, which is preserved on more than 7 meters. This wall constituted the border of the settled area. Some post hole in pink here are likely connected to this structure. So inside the settlement, architecture concentrated against the stone-based wall. Rooms are built with mud bricks of different size or sometimes by parsa. And in general, there is at least 3 rows of rooms, sometimes 4 rooms, from the stone-based wall to the center of the site. Unfortunately, we couldn't find the internal limit of the site because it is too damaged by erosion. But we can guess the central part of the site was an open space because we made a sounding and analysis of the sediment taken from this area evidence some vegetal remains. You have here an example of the rooms. They have access from one to each other, but no streets have been identified. So it is likely that the succession of rooms was accessible from the center of the site. Most of the rooms have domestic features like fireplaces, some bench-like stone structures, and associated floors and occupation layers. Some of the rooms appears to have been used for food production. So here, for example, the center of a room is occupied by a fireplace. You can see it at different stages of the excavation. And near this fireplace, we found grinding and milling tools. Other areas are more difficult to interpret, such as the northern part of the site, with this unusual structure here, made by several narrow spaces. And there are no grinding tools in this area, but several truncated cone-shaped pestles, hammerstones, friction endstones, and polishers, all compatible with a sector with a more artisanal vocation. In particular, a dolerite hammer, whose fine finish and traces of use suggest it was probably used as a metallurgist tool. In Borut Kurgan, there is also a whole series of more atypical rooms with no analogies outside the oasis, all of them located directly against the stone-based wall. Some of these rooms, as you can see here, are carefully paved with potsherds. So like this one in the western part of the site, but also a similar one in the northern part of the site. So they are limited by the surrounding walls and by mud brick walls on the other side. And the floor and part of the walls are completely covered by potsherds lying flat and very carefully put on the floor. Several arc-shaped pits, smaller, display the same kind of floor inside, but they are found inside the rooms. Other small rooms, or rather some loci, are smaller and are filled with small size and medium size boulders covered with a thick layer of mud. The function of these small rooms is very intriguing, but considering their relative frequency on the site, their location close to the surrounding wall, the fact that they have no entrance and should have been accessed from the top, and that their unusual layout has likely been made in order to isolate their floor, I think storage functions is very likely, presumably for dry products, because a cistern would have been recognizable by water traces. For now, at Borut Kurgan, we identified 3 successive occupations. At the time, the site was enclosed by the surrounding stone-based wall. These phases are interrupted by short abandonment levels, and so they evidence a long occupation of the settlement, but all during the early Iron Age. We have a very similar C14 dates for all these stages, which range from the end of the 13th to the middle of the 11th century BCE. During these 3 stages, the layout remain very similar, if not identical, from one phase to the other, with wall frequently rebuilt directly on the top of previous wall. So you have a good example here with 3 colors marking the 3 different phases of the wall. The remains of the 3rd stage have suffered from a surface erosion, and we were able to find them only in some places. The best known stage is the 2nd one, you can see here, because the remains are in a good state of preservation and they give a good idea of the occupation of the site. And the earliest stage has been uncovered only in a few places and has not yet been excavated in extension. You can see here, for example, the top of a wall of the 1st stage. And usually these first walls have all been leveled off to allow the area to be flattened for building a new architecture. During this last season, we surprisingly found some evidence of a 4th, more ancient stage. We found it only in a deep stratigraphic trench we opened in the southern part of the site, which revealed that the foundation layer, as well as the lower course of the surrounding wall, were underlain by a quite soft layer of reddish-brown aeolian deposit. In this layer, we discovered several early Iron Age potsherds, some animal bones, and we also discovered a set of stone beads. So they include 5 beads of identical pendant shape with a truncated cone-shaped end. Also different kind of beads, cylindrical with 3 rows, including 1 finished and 1 unfinished bead. And finally, in the same place, we found a small river pebble, which is very similar to the stone used to make the beads. So taken all together, these elements point to a local manufacture of these beads and perhaps to the presence of a workshop area, although no floor layer or architectural remains have been found in this area. This layer of aeolian deposit is earlier than the construction of the building excavated in the area. It is also earlier than the enclosing wall. It suggests that the site was already occupied at an earlier date, but still during the early Iron Age. Another contemporary site, Boykush Tepe, is located immediately below Borut Kurgan, right in the valley it overlooks. It is a small site identified by surface ceramics with no enclosure. We opened 4 trenches on the site, which made it possible to determine the occupied zone, or at least the zone where the remains are preserved, is limited to the central and eastern part of the site. In that area, we found very faint traces of walls with only the first bed of mud bricks that fit with the anomalies revealed by a geomagnetic survey. Only some hollow structures have been preserved, mainly some storage pits, including one here with a cover made of mud bricks that have fallen at the bottom. The small valley where Boykush Tepe is located is today used for agriculture as soon as abundant rainfall allows for natural irrigation. This location in the middle of the field and the presence of storage structure suggests that Boykush Tepe might have been a small farm linked to Borut Kurgan. About 1 kilometer southeast from Borut Kurgan, Kari Tepe is also protected by a stone-based wall. The overall pattern is similar, with some mud brick architecture abutting the surrounding wall. The site has first been excavated by Odiljan Hamidov and Shapulat Shaidulayev in 2016 and 17, and then by us in 2022. About half of the site has been excavated to the virgin soil, giving a good idea of its layout and chronology. The site is highly exposed to wind erosion, and only the base of the architecture has been preserved. As you can see on this picture, preserved remains are quite thin, but still we were able to identify 2 stages dated between the mid-13th and mid-11th centuries based on C14 dates, so exactly at the same time as Borut Kurgan. An entrance to the site was discovered at the southeast of the site. It is made by 1.5 meter interruption into the main enclosure wall, and this gate leads down to the Kairit modern village to the south and to the river. After entering the site from the gate, there is a passage 2 meter wide and 6 meter long with a slight slope from the north to the south. The settlement is organized in small housing units separated by streets, of which we have identified at least three units. They are organized in rows of 2 or 3 rooms, starting from the enclosing wall to the central part of the site. Most of the rooms display evidence of a domestic occupation with different kind of fireplaces or small stone benches. And in each housing unit, there were rooms used for storage, especially some small loki filled in with boulders and covered by a thick layer of clay, exactly as in Borut Kurgan. But here we found no rooms paved with potsherd, but different kind of storage structures, such as this deep silo. You can see here, it was sealed with mud bricks, and just below, at the bottom, it had two small depressions for storage pots. We also found several jars buried up to the neck. At least one, you can see here, had a beautiful painting, and it was already repaired by a coat of plaster before being buried, giving it a second life. The central part of the site was occupied by a courtyard where we found open-air fireplaces, dump pits, and other large pits, maybe remaining from trees. So yeah, we excavated only part of this courtyard. This area has later been reoccupied, notably by a structure made with large pebbles of different size and in some places rammed earth, as well as numerous fireplaces. It is likely linked to light occupation, maybe that of a shepherd or several shepherds. And we found only a few pottery in these layers, which include a few antique and Islamic pottery mixed with a majority of early Iron Age pottery. The fireplaces contained only ashes and no shards remain, which gives us no hope of dating this occupation, unfortunately. The largest site is Gazak Cutan. It stands at the top of a rocky outcrop overlooking the oasis here at the top of this mountain. You can see here. And from this place, it was possible to control all accesses to the oasis and to see all of the other sites. It is very difficult to reach with no direct access to water. But despite this difficult access, the site has been protected by a stone-based wall, which adapt perfectly to the natural topography. The wall is doubled at the entrance. So in that part, you can see in pink on the geomagnetic map, likely to control the access. In 2019, we worked on 3 trenches. The architecture appears very close to the modern surface, and we identified only one occupation phase. 3 internal walls, also made of stones, seem to delimit some internal quarters inside the site. The small rooms uncovered are made with mud brick walls, and they contain all domestic features, everyday artifacts, fireplaces, indicated that the site was indeed used as a settlement. We found also one small structure paved with pottery, likely for storage structure. We have for now one C14 date for this site, which indicate an occupation between the beginning of the 13th and the middle of the 11th century BCE. A few words to conclude on the occupation of Kairit Oasis. While there are significant similarities between the 3 main sites, notably the enclosing wall, but also a shared material culture, there are also some specific features for each site. So among them, the organization into housing units separated by streets at Kairit Tepe, into a clustered unit at Borut Kurgan and in different quarters separated by a stone walls at Gazak Cutan. Different storage practices in buried jars at Kairit Tepa, in room paved with potsherds at Borut Kurgan and Gazak Cutan, but also in material culture with, for example, some coarser pottery and more vessels with incised ornament at Kairit Tepa than Borut Kurgan, or with greater techno-functional diversity among the stone tools at Kairit Tepa. Yet the C14 dates available are exactly contemporary and the sites are very close to each other. So in my opinion, it suggests each site was more or less independent, maybe being a home to an extended family that developed its own customs, but within the same cultural community. In 2022, we discovered a new site, Kuduk Bulak, which we started to explore in May 2023. Here, we hope to shed light on the reasons that led the community to settle in this area, because our initial results suggest that the site was occupied both during the Bronze Age and the Iron Age. The site is located on a small ridge, now along the road leading from Maidan to Pashkurt. It was used until an agricultural land until 10 years ago, so it is quite eroded, and we choose to locate the sounding in the best preserved area on the northwestern part of the site, here. According to the surface collection of pottery, the western part of the site was occupied during antiquity. Several Bronze Age occupations have been identified in Trench 1. So the first stage, the older stage, is linked to various features, including fireplaces, post holes, and 2 occupation floors. The second stage is associated with the construction of an ellipsoidal persa wall, linked with post holes, post bays, fireplaces, and a storage jar. This low persa wall has been intersected by recent tractor tracks, so it is difficult to get a good idea of it, but it might have been a supporting wall for a light structure like a yurt, for example. After its abandonment, this area of the site was later reoccupied with the construction of a stone-based building, of which only the base remain. To the northeast of this trench, in Trench 3, we got a totally different picture. The first preserved architectural remains are located at a depth of around 60 centimeters from the modern surface. This phase is documented by 3 mud bricks walls and 2 parsa walls associated with several floors. And thanks to a small sounding, we could determine the existence of an older occupation phase. So although this, the dimension of the walls and the apparently large building made us first believe this building is dated to the Bronze Age, the associated pottery is typical of the early Iron Age, including some painted fragments. We are therefore dealing with an occupation that seems totally different from that of the other sites of Kairit Oasis. Between the Bronze Age and the early Iron Age, the evolution was not only related to the type of sites, but also to the ability of the community to adapt to the environment. Indeed, the location of the sites in relation to water sources shows major difference. Observation made in the field as part of the project shows that the Bronze Age sites are located in the direct vicinity of the springs, which are mainly distributed into 2 alignments linked to the geomorphological structure, near the village of Zarabag and to the southeast of the study area, where Kuduk Bulak is located. This pattern enables water to be supplied from the sources directly. The layout of the Iron Age site, at least Borut Kurgan and Kairit Tepa, is different. They are located downstream of a major spring line, but no longer in direct contact with the spring, in a position where they can benefit from the inflow of the surface water runoff. In addition to the natural digging of channels following the dynamics of torrents, flows were likely captured by digging simple canals for use by the settlements and the fields. Such a network would have benefited from both the capture of the water from the springs and the concentration of runoff during rainfall. Today, the current uses of water reveal the ability of local people to adapt to the strong seasonal variability in water supply. Despite their destructive nature, the intense spring rains, known as jala, are used to irrigate the crops by means of diversion and temporary ditches that redirect and disperse their flow directly into the plots. In this way, the use of simple techniques to capture the maximum available resource provides a relevant example for reconstructing the water management of the Iron Age site. The search for canals contemporary with the site requires a combination of landscape observation techniques, sedimentological analysis, and dating, which is ongoing. Initial results indicate the presence of ancient canal in the vicinity of the Borut Kurgan site. We made some trenches on one of them, and we found at least 3 phases of use, and we have OSL dating for the second phase to the 5th, 6th century AD by OSL and pottery. So the first phase of the canal is necessarily from the same period or earlier. These elements witness the long history of irrigation in the area and the potential for canals to be reused right up to present day, underlying the importance of maintaining them over the long term, despite the fact that there is no site from antiquity in the vicinity of this canal. Near the site of Borut Kurgan, along this canal, we identified an area that could correspond to old cultivation plot based on the topography, the canals visible on the surface, and mapping based on satellite imagery. Geomagnetic prospecting of the area shows some anomalies that could correspond to small irrigation diversion. And we opened a trench in this area that allowed us identifying some concave traces with significant water infiltration marks, which could correspond either to furrows or to diversion for irrigating agricultural plots. The large number of storage structures uncovered at different sites, as well as numerous milling tools, underline the importance of agriculture for Iron Age communities. The large number of archaeobotanical samples and phytoliths collected, whose study is undergoing, will shed light on agricultural and dietary practices, as well as provide valuable clues on site environment. The probable extent of the ancient irrigation network, as well as the homogeneity of the Kairit oasis settlements and their simultaneous dating, shows that the area was occupied by a fairly large and autonomous community. However, it was not isolated at all. The location of the site is a good clue for it. So Gazak Cutan is located exactly at the entrance to the road leading to the Pashkurt Valley, here. And during our survey, we also discovered a second group of sites located as a strategic location around Goz, here, where we found some early Iron Age pottery at the surface of 3 sites. Two of them overlook the Gozdachana Gorge, where the Ulan Bulaksai River flows, providing another access to the Sharabat Darya Valley, where we find the contemporary sites of Jarkutan and Jandaolat Tepa. There is evidence of contact with these sites in the Sharabat Darya Valley. For example, pottery of the Kairit Oasis is sometimes identical to pottery from Jarkutan, including this kind of handmade wheel-fashioned bowl, which is very typical from Jarkutan. We have also similar kind of pottery in a Goz Oasis with this foot of a pedestal bowl, which has analogies in Jarkutan. But there is also strong evidence of the presence of Andronovo-related cultures, as the Pashkurt Valley features petroglyph and pseudo-kurgans. Some of these petroglyphs, typical of the final Bronze Age petroglyph of the Andronovo community, are similar to a painted pottery from Jarkutan. A similar case is found at Osh, where painted pottery and decoration on the pottery have similarities in the nearby petroglyph site of Suleimanto and also at Saimalitash. These analogies, along with the location of petroglyph and kurgan around the Iron Age site, open up a number of possibilities for connection between the two cultural communities and even raise some doubts about the absolute heterogeneity. Another route worth exploring is the foothills of the Kugitang mountain, which is now partly located in the border zone with Turkmenistan, but it was probably an important passage area in ancient time. At the end of the two valleys parallel to the north to the Pashkurt Valley, there are some caves with evidence of Yazwan occupation. One, Kaptar Kamar, has been excavated by the Czech Uzbek team, and three other ones around Khatak have been sounded this year by a team led by Rustam Suleimanov. Maybe it was through here or through the Sharabat Darya Valley that the Kairit Oasis was in contact with the northern fringe of the Sine sepulchral culture. Indeed, since Lynn is co-organizing this series, I would like to end by returning to the beads discovered in Borut Kurgan, because the only known analogies are found in Kimirek Kum 1 in the northern part of the Bukhara Oasis, which is about 370 kilometers as the crows fly. Forgive me, Lynn, for the approximate location of the site, which in turn raises a number of questions in terms of movements and interaction of the early Iron Age community. So this mountainous area, which is today quite difficult to access with terrible roads, was at that time an area rich in interaction with a more or less distant contemporary culture. It was home to a highly adaptive community that developed long-term strategies and succeeded in surviving for at least 2 centuries in that area. Thank you.